I'd like to thank you to this episode. And just a reminder, too, this episode is going to have some kind of like things in it that might not be appropriate for all age groups. So you may want to pre-watch it before you share it with some younger people. Thank you. Hi, I'm Father Peter Dugandzic, pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Kings Park.
And I'm Randi Hochenberger, Director of Evangelization.
And we have another one of these very special episodes where we've invited a parishioner to join us. This is Jessica Schaefer. And Jessica actually revealed herself to me this weekend. If you remember last week's episode, we were talking about natural family planning and NFP Awareness Week. And I gave my homily this past weekend. And lo and behold, Jessica sees me at the doors of the church and comes up to me and says, I work in the Gianna Center. So it's a pleasure to have you here to bring some real life and practical aspects to this conversation. We're airing this on Friday at 10 o'clock, so it's the tail end of NFP Awareness Week. But I think it's such an important thing that Catholics in general have that opportunity to know that there's just something more beautiful to human sexuality and the human person than meets the eye. So if you could, maybe just give us a little bit of a background, a little bit of how your journey as to how you got to where you are.
Yes. So my name is Jessica Schaefer. I'm a certified FertilityCare Practitioner. I work at the Gianna Center in Babylon, New York. I work there with a couple other practitioners and nurses, but also nurse practitioners, doctors, all trained and certified in NaProTechnology. So that stands for Natural Procreative Technology. You guys mentioned that last week. But really, we work in tandem with the doctors to teach women and couples how to chart their cycles in a way that is standardized, that's evidence-based, in a way that the doctor can then use that as a diagnostic tool for their treatment. They know when they should be going for certain types of testing, when they should be doing certain kinds of blood work or ultrasounds or taking certain medications. So it's really rewarding work, and that you are like speaking to a myriad of different types of people. So we'll have like 18-year-olds who are coming in with PCOS. We'll have like 40-year-olds who have been told like IVF's their only option, or they've already like failed with IVF and IUI. Or we just have young married couples who they say, hey, we're trying to like plan our family and figure out how this all works. So you really just get a really broad spectrum of people coming in, all different faiths, all different backgrounds. And yeah, it's been a great experience. I really believe God like placed me here for a reason, and I'm so special and like blessed, but just that, there was a lot of prayer and like struggle that went with like, God, like, what actually do you want to do with what the gifts I have?
Oh, you were telling me before that you are a lifelong Catholic, but as you were kind of hinting at, this kind of technology, this kind of understanding is not specifically Catholic. A little bit of your journey, I guess, to how you became a wife and mother. And
yeah, so my husband and I met very, very young. We were 15 years old though. Started dating very young. I got married. I was 22. Literally had to postpone our honeymoon like 2 weeks so he would be old enough to rent a car overseas. So that was fun when we're calling the agents like, oh, you're only 23? Like, you gotta wait. Like, so that was the whole thing. But married very young. Right around that time, I'm trying to discern like what my career is going to be as well. And I kind of got the answer because I ended up getting pregnant. So, and we were open to it at the time. Like, we were using NFP. We were like, if it happens, it happens. Like, we're fine. So I ended up getting pregnant. And over time, I have a friend of mine who is teaching me about the Creighton Model system. So that's the system of charting that I now teach. And she is showing me about it. And she's like, you should be a teacher. Like, you'd be really good at this. And I'm like, you know what? I actually feel like I'm passionate about it because I have a lot of personal experience just with, some fertility issues. But also that like, this is important. I always felt this sense of like, why didn't someone just say this earlier? Why didn't someone just tell me? And so it's, I felt really compelled that it's like, I'm going to get the word out.
It's one of the best kept secrets, I'm sure, in the world today. And that's mostly because the mainstream medicine doesn't really acknowledge it for the most part. It's not taught in any of the universities and any of the medical programs. You were actually referring last week to your own experience of how you were just kind of railroaded.
Yeah. And, there, to a certain extent, there's like there's not a lot of money to be made from this compared to, say, like IVF and other things. So it's not as flashy as a thing. So there is something to be said for like the economics behind it.
I remember you mentioning that, and I was thinking how in our practice, like you said, how generally, like you go to any doctor, you have a 15-minute slot. Really kind of less because they're always running behind, right? And it's get them in and out. Where at the Gianna Center, it's like we need an hour and we get an hour slot and we fight for that slot because it's like you are learning someone's background and history and like there's a lot to discuss to really get to the root of the problem. But it's just like that's not the way the system is designed. It's designed for
and I mean, I will say too that I've been very much involved in the Catholic Church in my real life. Like I studied this, I went to school, got a master's of divinity. Other than that time where I kind of dropped off, I was around this, and there weren't a lot of advocates in the Catholic Church at that time that were also a proponent of it. So, part of my process has been, getting over my anger. Like, why didn't somebody in the church tell me about this? Yeah. But I mean, and I appreciate that. I sought out the Gianna Center. The epilogue to my story is that I left that doctor and that practice, especially after another one when I started charting. And I went to the same doctor. He looked at my chart and he was like, I don't know what this is. And he's like, you're sure you're not going to go on the pill? Like, what if you get pregnant? Because I'm married at this point. Yeah. When I've had my reversion. And I'm like, but I know when I'm ovulating and such. And he's like, how could you possibly know that? And you're like, yeah. So
you're a medical professional.
It's like, oh.
So from that moment, I left that practice. At that point, the Gianna Center wasn't on Long Island. I actually went to New Brunswick, New Jersey, where they had an office there. Met with that doctor. Within 6 months, they brought the Gianna Center here to Long Island. And
so
that's Dr. Biter, yeah. And then I came over to when Dr. Carpentier was here. We had invited him to our previous parish. I was his patient for a while. The only reason why I'm still not a patient at the Gianna Center is because I don't suffer from fertility issues. So because of the importance of those slots that you were talking about, my slot was not as important as, say, somebody was struggling with the issues. So I do actually see a doctor who is trained in this, but they're not affiliated with the Gianna Center. Well, she is, but she's not. I don't see her from that practice.
Yeah, well, and the most important thing is being that you do have a doctor who is supportive of your views and your beliefs. And I know I had that issue just like with my children. I had the same OBGYN for most of my pregnancy. So my early one was like pretty much the only pro-life doctor on Long Island. He retired like halfway through my second pregnancy, and they like kind of like, oh, well, this other doctor, she's gonna, take over, and she's been trained the same way he has, and she'll support you. I'm like, okay. I go in there. This is my second pregnancy, and first visit, she's talking about like, okay, like you had a C-section, so we'll see how this goes the second time. But if we end up doing another C-section, we can always untie your tubes while we're in there. I'm like, excuse me, like I've been having my second kid, like no. And I was only like 24 at the time. I'm like, I'm like very young, like you're not doing it. So never seen her again. But ended up with a different doctor in the practice who was not like recommended to me. And like I remember early days, like I'd come back after my babies, and she'd be like, all right, well, do you want like birth control? And I'd be like, I'm not interested in that. And over time, though, she just started to understand, like, okay, like there's certain testing I didn't want. And she was like supportive of that. Like, I don't need to know about, you don't need to know amniocentesis. We're not going to do anything crazy. Like, I just want a healthy pregnancy. But then over time, finding that she also was Catholic, and all my kids are named after saints. So like really like the last names you've seen. So like Magdalene, Colby, Beckett, Philomene is the outlier, but Fulton. And, just that she'd be like, oh yeah, like named after saints. And then she's telling me about her mother who went to Poland and like was hemorrhaging for years, goes to Poland, they pray there, and she had like a miraculous healing. Like she's telling me this in the office. And I'm like, and I'm thinking like context wise, I'm like, I don't know if you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. It's a miracle. And I was like, that's so good to hear like good stories like that. I just wasn't sure of the context. And she's like, no, it was a miracle. And I was like, wow. So just that like having the support and like finding the right doctors is so important. But it's just not always instantaneous too. Like there was some stuff to weather with her before, like now she's just totally what we do. So.
And one of the things that I think is so important in this conversation is to remind ourselves first of the human person, and that procreation is miraculous. I don't know any other way to speak it. So as you're talking about miracles, we talk about the miracle of new life in the church. In the practice and being part of the Gianna Center, have you had any of those experiences with someone suffering from infertility that finally can now have a child, or someone who is struggling with irregularities and other things that have now found their successes?
Yeah. No, I feel like and it's funny because it's just like, I feel like every story is kind of a success story in a sense. Cause sometimes like you guys had said it where it's like, we're looking for results, right? Like, okay, like what are we going to produce? Like what's being produced here that's going to be valuable? And I think most of the time it's like, women who achieve pregnancy who are able to also maintain the pregnancy is a bigger issue sometimes. It's that like they come in, they have achieved a pregnancy, they've miscarried multiple times, and doctors are just not following them through into the pregnancy, like supporting them hormonally, whatever they might need, or like withdrawing that aid too soon. So a lot of times it can be more that it's like, all right, like helping it to continue to be a healthy pregnancy. But a lot of the times it's just women also like coming to peace with their bodies, really, and just being able to say like, okay, like I see what it's doing, I understand what's happening. It's not this mystery, right? And it's kind of like the mystery of like obviously God has mysteries, but like this doesn't have to be one of them. Like this doesn't, we can figure it out. So I always personally for me, that is always the bigger achievement, mainly because I'm coming from that education perspective. I'm like teaching them about it. And so that's the biggest result that I see personally working with people is that like light bulb goes on. They know that like this is just something that's a part of their life now. It probably should have always been a part of what they knew about themselves. So I always think that's
I think that integration is a big piece of it because not only is this an unknown for a lot of people, but right, the mantra is this is something to be wary of or to be fearful of. So this idea that you know, women's fertility is something that needs to be managed.
right.
You know, I even know like in the language of like the Creighton model, it's not so much symptoms, but your biomarkers. What are the biomarkers of your fertility? Not a symptom as if you have some sort of an illness associated with you just because you happen to have a cycle.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's like we see simpler, we see biomarkers, we say, okay, like there's some irregular bleeding here. This could mean that there's low progesterone. We're seeing like a limited, we're not seeing enough like cervical fluid when we should be, and maybe that means that there's a thyroid issue going on. So there can be a lot of bigger indicators there. But I think, kind of coming back to that in a sense, like I said, like there's different benefits to be garnered from it, but also that like women who come through using NaPro doctors, like we're seeing fewer preterm births, we're seeing like healthy moms, healthy pregnancies, resulting from these methods, like rather than like an IVF option where it's like much higher risk for mother and baby throughout, which just nobody really talks about, but it's a controlled situation, right? And I think that's mainly kind of when we go the traditional option, right? Because we do still have a traditional medical model. Like we're going to try and diagnose you, we're going to like, figure out what the root cause is. But not that traditional model where it's like, well, like a doctor, when a woman's pregnant, it's like, well, let's just like plan your C-section date. Let's just plan your induction date, right? Where they just want to be able to like have as controlled of a setting as possible. I think with this, it just allows the body to do what it was meant to do and in a healthy and safe way.
And I think that's the key right there is that it's the whole person, body and soul, the whole being that has to be dealt with. Do you have any cases where someone comes in and because you're Catholic and it's obviously a Catholic healthcare, is there opportunities that you have to discuss some of the faith with them and their approach to their pregnancy with faith?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and I'm not like a like get you in a debate type person. That's just not my personality. It's like I feel like I know the faith, but I also generally I try to be really patient with the patients who come in. Because oftentimes they're coming from a perspective of like you don't know where they're coming from, and like you as a priest, like every people coming to the church don't know what their experience has been in the church before, and so similarly with like with them, you're in the medical field, so they have their preconceptions about that. And then also anything Catholic, they already have their notions about that. And so we're always kind of like supporting that in a way that it's a part of the language, it's a part of what we discuss. And I remember there was one particular girl I've been working with who she was like, young, in her 20s, and she's charting, but she's also like seeing this guy and like chart intercourse on the chart. But we had a lot of discussions, and like I wasn't saying like you shouldn't be having then she can do whatever she has free will. I can't make her do anything. Like that's the way it is. So you do just really get a lot of training and like walking alongside people as they do things that maybe it's like, I don't know, it's a great idea. But it did open so many conversations to like, hey, like where do we really think this is going, and like also like just seeing biomarkers on the chart of like, hey, like, this was a stressful time for you. And you know what? Like these things that are going on seem to be happening at a certain time, like in your cycle. What does that say about you? And just having honest conversations with her about, what her goals were and like, how is this serving you? And what do you actually deserve? Right. So it's just part of it. It's just like, because it is such an intimate conversation, which is hard to have. Like, it's like, hey, I just met you, but let's discuss the most intimate parts of you. But also at the same time, like over time, because we follow up with women, usually the program itself is about 8 follow-ups, and there's like an intro and 8 follow-ups that come after, but it's like very concentrated in the beginning and then it spreads out. So you really see a lot of growth. And I just think it's one of those things that, like most things, and I see it all just with parenting, like I may not actually see the fruits of this all the time right now, but I know that I'm a part of this conversation with you right now. And like, it usually comes very naturally, especially when people are open to it that way.
I've been looking into these things and I've been researching. And so probably as a celibate male, I know far too much about women's cycles now than I should.
But you did grow up with sisters, at least.
I did grow up with sisters, but
It's
we didn't
biology.
talk about that. It's
Like,
biology
just
for
say
sure.
that.
That's true. The interesting thing is that it's actually just, how do I always say this? Like a very straightforward, like obviously you teach charting and stuff. So I know there are purists who want it to be on paper, and there are purists who say, no, we're going to do it digitally.
Oh no, I think it needs to be digital, but I'm just,
You are young.
I'm like, I have a certification to obtain, but I think it should be.
Well, there's like there's the digital and the paper works. Like for instance, my chart is exactly what you see on paper. I just happen to have it on a spreadsheet online, so that way I can map it, and then I don't have to change the numbers or whatever. I have little icons for, so it looks exactly like the physical paper Creighton chart. It's just and that's different than say like a lot of the apps that are very popular that people use a lot now.
Well, you're also not like algorithming your body.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest issue we see. And I support people using apps and trying to figure, at least like whatever's going to help you have more of an awareness. And like a little more like, okay, like let's honor the body here and not just, I'm just going to go GYN and get a pill, like with IUD or a patch or whatever. I support anybody using those things. I think it's like when you use an app, generally they're doing predictions and saying like, oh, well, this is the time you should be fertile. Like, no, like you don't actually need the tech to tell you. Like God made it so you can decipher it.
Right. Yeah.
God created these things so you can actually see it. So something like what you're doing, it makes sense because
I'm taking my life. I'm the input. I'm the algorithm.
You're the data. Like you're like, I'm just recording the data and I'm putting it down. So,
and the thing is that the algorithm, it can make mistakes, and depending on what it's put into it. So if it's basically an upgraded version of, say, the rhythm method, which the Creighton model and modern NaPro stuff is not, then it's like, well, for the past 12 cycles, this is what it's looked like for you. So that's, now we're making predictions about this cycle. It's like, well, that's actually not the model, and you're not engaging in. So right, if I have this app, right, well, who am I not talking to? I'm not talking to my husband.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily talking about it with my doctor. And so this entire model is built out of this framework of integration of how we're made.
Do it for me.
Right. And so we're supposed to be becoming more human, becoming more connected to one another through these models as part of what makes it natural and, more human. And by outsourcing to an app, there's some helpful things that they can do. But it's missing some of the main points and benefits, I think.
We've been using this word Creighton a lot. Could you kind of give just a background on what the Creighton model is?
I was kind of thinking, I don't know what people really know about. Like,
probably most people don't know very much.
It's like really big. So the Creighton model system was really born out of, you guys mentioned it last time, but Dugandzic, right? So people in cyclical where they're just making this call out to doctors and scientists and saying, hey, like, let's find a better option. Like, hey, like we're rejecting birth control that is like against like what the human body is designed to do and how God intends it. But like, we want to find an option for people to have an awareness and learn. And so that's really, there was the Billings ovulation method. There's like a method of basically looking at like cervical fluid, right? Women have like cervical fluid that they can observe. And so there was that method. The Creighton model system was born out of that, but at a different level of standardization, where everything has basically an entire system of reporting, that like there's doctors who are trained to interpret these things. There's been a ton of research backed on it. It has efficacy ratings. And so from there, though, there have been other methods that have been, born out of that call. So There's the Marquette method of family planning where you use like a monitor, like, throughout your cycle to tell you, all right, well, like when are my estrogen levels high? And when am I seeing, a spike of LH that would indicate like I'm ovulating in this window of time? And then when do those levels go down? There's also like basal body temperature is another marker of fertility. So you can take your temperature at the same time every day. Because after you ovulate, progesterone spikes. Generally, you will see like a spike in your temperature because it has a warming effect on the body. So there's just a lot of different like evidence-based signals that the body already does and gives us that these methods just say, hey, like we're gonna go hardcore investigate this, like let's research this. Whereas like traditional medical field is like, yeah, we'll just we found that band-aid solution back then. So, and I think it's just really delayed a lot of like what should be done for women.
Now, if somebody makes the argument, it sounds very burdensome.
Mm-hmm.
Is it?
No, I mean, I would say like with any of these methods, the amount of time that you spend like using it per day, it's like a minute, like tops, So like if I'm thinking about the Creighton model system, with the Creighton model system, we ask couples or really women to be making observations of cervical fluid, and you do that when you go into the bathroom. Hopefully we're all already going to the bathroom. So you're already there, you're already in there, you wipe, you check, that's it. And you write it down at the end of the day. That's really it. It's really just a habit change, which honestly can be kind of hard for some people, like depending upon, I'll teach women who are like nurses and teachers and they're like, I don't really get bathroom breaks. I'm like, that's hard. But also we'll just do the best we can, figure it out. In that it is really not time consuming. It is just mindset changing and habit changing. And that, I mean, I won't lie, that actually can be the most burdensome thing. We talk about like trying to have these conversations, trying to make this more mainstream and, not taboo to talk about. That is the bigger obstacle, is that like just getting people to be like accepting of it. I mean, it's just, once you're on board, it's easy.
Okay, we've done a lot of talk about women. How does the male factor into all of this?
Yeah. I have taught a lot of women alone and also couples. It's fine for women to learn this. And obviously I'll teach like young women who are like, single and, just trying to figure out like, what their bodies are doing. And that's fine. That's good. They can do it. It's great. I love teaching husbands. Like it is the best. Like, just like they have no context for this. Usually they're like, what? That's happening. And it's just, but it's also really interesting because I often find most of the time that, the way that the system is designed, right? The women are having to make observations in order to understand, like, oh, where am I at my cycle? But along with that, with these systems, you do have to have an understanding of like, okay, well, certain kinds of observations mean something, right? So this means I'm fertile, this means I'm infertile, and there are instructions around that. And so oftentimes, like, the woman is trying to form these habits, get this understanding of something that she's been told her whole life to ignore, right? It's been told, like, yeah, don't pay any attention. And now she's got to, like, be locked into it. And then oftentimes I find the men are a little better at being more, like, quantitative about it. They'll be like, oh, yeah, obviously you saw this kind of thing, so we're going to count 3 days of fertility after that. Or they already know, like, use that stamp. Oh, no, that's from this. And they're able to kind of be a little bit more separated from it.
That's the masculine genius at work.
Yeah, but, like, where they're able to kind of, like, like, the woman is quality, he's quantity. Just kind of like, all right, like, this we're going to count, that we know what we have to do. He's got the instructions down. Or, like, I'm even asking, like, definitions, and like I said, she's in like, okay, I'm trying to figure this out and learn this because I'm actually acting on this like on a daily basis. And he's like, oh yeah, that's that. Like, I'll be doing a Zoom call and I'll ask the woman a question and I see the guy in the back like he knows the answer, and I'm like, it's a group project, you can answer. You can tell me too. And so I find that that's always really rewarding. And mentioned it before the podcast, but just that, like, it's conversations that like can feel taboo or awkward, but like if we're like, we need to get over that. Like, if we can get over that, like, we're going to be having more conversations once we have kids, right? And you're going to want to be able to like support your children when they come into a time where this is a concern for them. So it's really cool and kind of fun to see that happen.
I think one of the things that couples have told me is that their ability to communicate is so much better when they started to learn natural family planning.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been your experience?
I see it. Yeah, I definitely see it. And even so, it's like that, I thinking in the terms of like a newly married couple, right? And they're still kind of trying to learn, like, how do I navigate around you? And it just forces things to the forefront on a monthly basis. Like every month you're dealing with like the chance that, your wife is in a fertile time. Like, well, what do we do about that? Are we going to use that fertile time or are we going to avoid that fertile time? And no matter what, like we're always doing that in discernment with God, like, okay, well, whatever he wills, because nothing is 100%, but that either way, like it is a discussion that has to happen. But I find that like, I teach a lot of like, I'll do like pre-Canada courses where I'll do like the NFP portion of the talks. And I mentioned before, but I'm like, everything's a group project. Always gonna have to get their input. Like you're not gonna like, plan a vacation without saying like, hey, what do you think? And when couples learn this, especially like even right before they get married, it's like this is practice. Like this is practice for just the skills you're gonna have to have. About everything else, about the house you want to buy, about where you want to live, about the in-laws, about like how you want to raise your children. So I find that it's really valuable.
I wonder a little bit about the diocesan pre-K these days because post-COVID, it's down to a one-day session.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much you can cover in a one-day session. Certainly,
Yeah.
the NFP would be just another like 10-minute kind of a thing. I would hope that they're doing more. I haven't sat in any of the sessions.
Even pre-COVID, it wasn't great. And maybe you've heard some stories on it too.
I was involved in it for a bit. It would be when we would go in, it would be like an hour presentation. But also it's just like, you just pray that like their hearts and ears are open, right? And that's really all you can do. It's like, hey, like I've gotten like those are actually usually my most interesting ones because like I'd get like clap back on certain things. I'd have to like refute certain things, just like up there in front of everybody. And it was a really good experience and like good back and forth with people.
I do think that dialysis and consolidation of pre-Cana it does help. I mean, when I was doing pre-Cana back like 12 years ago, we went through a parish model, and so those were kind of like the wild west. That's whatever the people in the parish were trained to do. Now at that point, I had been, my years had been perking up to NFPs, but they didn't have anything like official. So I went out and I looked for them. So there was a couple teaching the symptothermal method at St. Aidan's in Wilson Park. So I signed up with them, learned that, was doing that until actually you introduced me to your cousin, who was a Creighton practitioner, and then the rest is history.
Yeah.
But it's been like you have to fall into it. It wasn't just like right there, because that's what people would ask too. It's like, well, how do I learn this model?
Right.
Where do I go to get the education that I need in order to, like, let's say I'm already thinking this is a great idea. I don't have to like refute you. I'm not going to argue with you. It sounds like something that I'm really curious about. Now, how do I learn it? How do I make this model?
And my goal with these episodes is just hoping that someone will hear it and say, you know what, I need to know more about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you want to like save this for the end. I can think of a couple places they could go to find more information. But
No better time than the present.
Just, a big one that I always push is naturalwomanhood.org. A great, amazing site. The people who are running it are actually like have created other groups that are kind of working to help to change legislation and things like that. But the main website, naturalwomanhood.org, they literally have like a quiz to see like, hey, like what type of natural thing would work best for you in your lifestyle, what your goals are. If you go on their website, if you're having like any kind of like adverse symptoms, like, hey, like my cycles are irregular, or like I don't even think I'm ovulating, you could literally type that in and it will come up with a ton of articles, like all, NaPro, just from that perspective. And that's like the place I send people first, is always there. There's also like the FACTS cohort of doctors, like FACTS. It's actually a cohort of doctors who are looking to educate like residents. They'll have them come in and do a course where they're like, following NaPro doctors and seeing the practices. So really trying to educate those students who aren't getting it, in medical school, right? They get like minimal amount of information on like family planning or reproduction. So that actually like helps them to be able to carry that into their practice in the future. And what else? There's also there
was a love and responsibility group for a while. I don't know whatever happened to them, if they're still even out there.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
They were more having the discussion. I don't think that they were more into teaching the methodology or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Responsibility, by the way, was a book written by St. John Paul II before he became the Pope. He wrote it way back in the 50s. He made it. It was a beautiful book. It's an absolutely wonderful book. It's not an easy read, but it's if you can get it, it's a wonderful work.
Yeah, if you even just Google like, you know, Creighton Model System, fertility care, those will all come up with information for the quote called the Six Center. And that's the center out in Nebraska where all the Creighton Model System really took off.
One of the things that I did notice, and I was on the Catholic Health Board for 9 years, and part of my tenure there is we were the ones that pushed to get the Gianna Center on Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of our big achievements, is to bring Dr. Carpentier and get it running here as well. My biggest criticism, and it still remains, is that it's called the Gianna Center. Mm-hmm. If you type the words infertility on almost any search engine, it's going to take you to the fertility specialist, and it never shows Gianna Center. Now I know
you mean like on the hospital system site or just Google?
Just like what's the average person going to do nowadays? They're going to go to a search engine, type in "I'm suffering infertility." Yeah. Does it ever show the Gianna Center? And it never does.
I will say I have had some patients. Maybe it's more, I don't know what the algorithm's doing, but more Manhattan based. And I have had a few patients who said I found you on. Okay, cool, great. Because we have Manhattan based, Rockwell Center, Babylon, and there's also a Gianna Center in Jersey now. So it's not Dr. Vida, but it's Dr. Monica Pataki, who's wonderful. She's also a surgeon. So able to do like those procedures that women may need. It's getting out there a bit more. And I think it's been frustrating, but also like it's like a slow release, right? And I think sometimes like because I've done so many of those pre-Cana sessions, and I always wonder, I'm like, I don't know what's sticking here. Like I'm just throwing stuff at the wall. And like you present it in a way that like makes sense and all of that. But also that often it is like someone I trust told me that they did this. Majority of the people who are coming into the practice is like, my friend was a patient. She got pregnant after infertility, and I'm here. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I do think it has to be that like personal encounter, which is more human, right? Mm-hmm. I thinking back to even back when I was getting married, like I wasn't as open to things. I mean, I was open to this once I figured it out, but there was a lot of stuff like you're not going to tell me how to live my life. But like I'm getting married, I'm going to do this thing, and it was
I have a plan.
Yeah, exactly. I find that a lot when I even speak to my friends, whether they're in a season where they're looking to get married. It's like they're like locked into what they know, what they're comfortable with, what they're doing. And that's a different conversation. So you can provide information, but the doorway is unique for everybody.
Yeah, I think that and I think we're just really coming from like a faith-based, perspective, right? That majority of our conversions don't happen because like I saw that like one thing, and I never delude myself that it's like I'm going to say that's going to make it happen, right? It's the Holy Spirit who's going to do that.
The reason that I pointed out is, and I love the fact that we call it Gianna after Saint Gianna.
Yeah.
But it's not one of those things that if somebody was wanting to find out a deeper answer to a very, very troubling question, infertility is a very, very difficult thing to go through. And I've known couples who have suffered with it. I mean, and these are good Catholics. I've known good Catholics who have come up to me and said that they've been trying to conceive. And would I give them a blessing? I'm always like, oh yeah, I'd love to give you a blessing. Yeah, we're going for our next round of IVF this afternoon.
Egg retrieval next week. It's like, oh, okay.
So these are even good, practicing Catholics. That's why I say, what are people doing? They're not necessarily asking, and we're not. I mean, it's the best kept secret in the Catholic Church is that infertility is actually something wonderful and has this wonderful body of teaching, not only theological but medical.
Right. I think that's kind of bringing back to what you said about like you say you feel like you're throwing things at the wall, and maybe that's not like when we do a pre-Cana session, that's not something they're struggling with, but it's still planting seeds. And so much of this, like I said, like I have a conversation with a young woman who's having sex outside of marriage. It's like, I want to plant seeds. I don't think I'm gonna like talk you out of this. It's like I'm not gonna support it, but also that like plant seeds, and like the most powerful conversions they have to come from within, and like what they are convicted to do. So I think that,
and not feeling judged along the way. Because that's usually one of those preconceived notions. Like, not only, first of all, is there's this idea, this is coming from Catholic. It's not real medicine. It's not real science.
Yeah.
But then also, and you Catholics, like, you are so judgmental and so this, that. And so if that's and that's not the chip on everybody's shoulder. I'm being very facetious now, but certainly that is the chip on some people's shoulders. And that makes the need to approach things patiently with compassion, listening, kind of having them see, actually, this wasn't what I thought it was.
Right. Yeah, just really like inviting to learn more.
I work with one of the online retainers because, especially post-COVID, young couples were big into the internet, and they would come in, and I would recommend. The one that I do recommend is built upon John Paul's theology of the body. They do have, from what I can tell, because I've never actually seen the course, but from what couples tell me, they have a very strong NFP section. And one of their debriefing questions is, will you use contraception or will you consider NFP? And probably half or more either don't answer it or say, none of your business kind of thing.
Yeah.
So back to that taboo again. My bedroom, my secret.
Yeah, and also, like you were mentioning how like a couple already coming to you and they're already pursuing, right? Like it's like that's that you mentioned like only option really given. But like, and so say you come to that conversation, it's like, well, now I have to tell you, no, what you're doing is bad. That's wrong. But like, it's that long game of like, you have NFP awareness week. You say it from the pulpit like you did, where it's like, there's other options. There's things that you can look into, and it's not going back and correcting something that it's like, we hope you never have to go, like that you're never even tempted to go down that path. Like there's an option for you elsewhere. And I think that can be the hardest part of all this. It's like it really just walking alongside.
I had a conversation with a young couple from my previous parish, and I just continued to see them. We got together on their anniversary, walked them to the marriage, everything. They went to the high school where I was assigned. It was a beautiful relationship until they started having infertility and wanting to have a child. And they were one of the couples that was asking for my blessing for their next round. And I said, well, that's wonderful. Have you ever considered? Now, I didn't jump right away on what you're doing is immoral. But I said, have you considered, there's a Catholic organization that helps couples that do it and have a much higher success rate and all of that. They cut me off after that and shut me out of their lives because I wasn't supporting what they were doing.
Right.
That's the world we live in. And
it's hard and it's hurtful. And at the same time, that's just a response out of like pain, right? Pain, and that like, I'm sure because going through IVF is not easy. And like, I've had women who come back from that or have, gone that direction. And it is not like it's not the easy choice. Like you think it's like, okay, like, NFP, I'm going to learn this thing and like, okay, what for testing and all of this. And at least like my perspective is like, what's the end game? I see even, regardless, like we're healing the body, we're restoring, what's there. We're making up for deficiencies in the body. We're not putting anything there that shouldn't have already been functioning that way. And so you go the route of IVF though, it's difficult. It is really, really difficult. I'm sure they probably have like come to their terms on it and like had their own struggles, but also that like, it only is about like 20 to 40% effective.
I don't even think it's that high, but I've heard different numbers. Yeah. One of the people that did leave a comment last week, thank you very much, Jen. I did see your comment, and it was a very good one, was an OBGYN nurse for many, many years and spoke about the lives that were just basically thrown into the system and their hopes just constantly dashed, and how painful even that can be, where they get your hopes up thinking, and then you go through 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds of implantations and none of them take. Yeah. And it's because they never really looked at the underlying problem. So I know there's issues like with endometriosis, with knowing what the cycle is and getting the body so that it's ready to accept.
Yeah. Accept life.
Accept life, exactly.
I think there's so there's that initial like disappointment and grief. If, to somebody who's been told that that's all that there is and they're trying to do that, maybe there's some cognitive dissonance that they've had to navigate through as they're like knowing like something doesn't feel right, but this is the only option they feel like they have to go with. There could be a lot of shame about this idea, like, why am I not able to have a child when that's all I want to do? So I think there's just a lot of complex emotions that go into it. And this is where like that one-on-one, that accompaniment kind of idea, this is like, well, you're not just a body in a lab. We're going to make it work. We're going to force it to do what you want it to do, or
or bypass.
Yeah.
Really, like when we're doing artificial reproductive technology, we're not healing the body, we're bypassing the system. We're gonna say, hey, we'll take that egg and that sperm, we'll make it happen, and then we'll implant it. We're gonna just that system that's like not working, we'll use it. We'll do it ourselves. And like kind of similarly, like with just, childbirth in general, like we'll schedule your C-section, we'll do this. It's all very controlled.
Unfortunately, the medical system has become this industry where the standardizations now, that's kind of what she was saying in her comment too, is this is the standard treatment. This is what we do now. This is what's in the manual. This is what we recommend.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it like doctors bad, because there's good ones. And they all come from their different perspectives.
I would have more of an issue with the systems today because these big systems didn't exist when I was younger. There might have been, independent hospitals, but they weren't part of larger systems that force you to do things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
There are laws in place actually that protect the doctors from the system.
Mm-hmm.
They're called captive PCs. They're not allowed. The doctor's still allowed to treat the patient in front of them the way they feel they should be treated.
Mm-hmm.
Ask anybody who works in a big system if they can do that.
But also just the training, and you had mentioned that before, like the doctors are not, and nurses and advanced care practitioners, they're not getting this kind of stuff in their education, in their own training, so they can't bring it into their practice. So it's like, it's not even to say like, okay, yeah, you're right, they're not necessarily bad doctors because they're not recommending alternatives,
but like
they're not aware of the alternatives. Right, like my doctor, like, I mean, it was a little offensive what he said to me, but I can't blame him for not knowing how to read a chart. He was never trained in that. So it was my responsibility to be like,
well, let me teach you.
Yeah, well, yeah, or and then go somewhere else to somebody who would know what to do. So I don't have any hard feelings against him. I just, I wish it wasn't so dismissive, but
I don't think there's a single medical professional that I've ever met that starts with, I want to harm.
Exactly.
Do no harm is where they start. The problem is because there's such a body of scientific knowledge nowadays that you'd have to have, that's why the era of specializations come. You're no longer just dealing with your doctor. Your doctor now says, oh, well, I've noticed this condition, I'm sending you here. Or you've got this going on, I'm sending you there.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with infertility. They're just sending you to the one that's in the book that they tell you to send them to.
Yeah. I think it's just the recognition that those medical professionals are just as much a victim of like, they can't practice in that way where it's like, give you my full attention an hour, right? Like unheard of. Like you said, they get a 15-minute slot. They're on to the next one. And that's just the way that it is in order to let people get paid and everything else. So it's not that like it's coming from like a necessary evil intention. It's really just that it's like, it's not designed in a way that we're really going to be able to realistically see the person. So
I look back
unfortunate.
Look back at the history of the medical profession in general, and the Catholics have always had their hands on it. And the earlier practices that the Catholics would be doing was always so much more personal. That's where a lot of the home doctors started to come from, and the doctors that would come and visit and do things like that. And those days of sadly, like you're kind of hinting, are moving in the rearview mirror very quickly because of the fact that the systems want to maximize profit.
Yeah. I mean, I keep thinking of Little House on the Prairie. What's the doctor's name?
I never really watched the show. So.
No, but it was like just the one doctor for the town who had to go everywhere. And obviously like we're way beyond that. And obviously we want to look at like the positive and negative where it's like that doctor who probably delivered a child, like that child sees them into adulthood. And that real, like, them. And that's obviously not the world we live in right now, but the trade-off being that we have so much more knowledge right now. Like we have so much more access. We have so much more research, that what we can use. So it's like we said before, like on extremes, and it's like, where can we find the middle?
One of the things that I think would be very helpful is a lot more philosophy of getting people, training people basically to think outside the box, to not just repeat the information you've heard, but interpret the information so that you're understanding what it is you're saying. I think young doctors especially are just given the language. This is what you do. This is what you say. This is how you do it. And not necessarily have the opportunity to really stop and pause, because there are, like I look what Jan went through with all the stuff that she was doing preparing to be a medical doctor, very rarely gets a chance to stop and think.
It's funny.
She'll come to me because she wants to have a conversation.
The year I spent studying abroad, which feels like ancient history now, in Oxford, and I was studying philosophy and theology. There was a a person in the same house living with me in the same program. He was there to study philosophy, and he was going on to medical school to become a doctor. And he said it'll look better for him on his medical school application if he has this philosophy under his belt. So, I mean, this is like going back like 20 years. So I don't know if things have changed that much, but the thing about philosophy is it's not just like this theoretical science that has nothing to do with the practical world. So we can develop from that in anthropology, right? An understanding of the human person, which is exactly what St. John Paul II has done in his theology of the body. Mm-hmm. He puts out there a model, a blueprint, and I've spoken about this blueprint of the human person on this podcast before, of what it is. And it's an integrative person. And so the idea behind this, if you go in as a doctor, as a medical professional with that scientific training, but you have an understanding of what the human person is in the ideal, which our model for that, by the way, Jesus Christ, then it kind of gives you a sense of what you're looking at. So it's not, you don't necessarily parse down a person to a body part, even if you are a specialist looking at a specific system.
Well, it's like going into any field, and if you don't have like your definition set of what something is, and it's like I get in there and I just all I see are the pieces, right? We want to go into it with the vocabulary and the understanding of like, okay, I can define what like a human is, like a soul composite, and like that. Like if I go into it with that background, I can see it all through that lens. So.
You said you'd like to get into this particular method that you've been teaching because of the fact that it's scientific, but does have some theology with it.
Yeah. So, I mean, we get into really like theology of the body is a part of the training, in that you're really like being trained, like, this is why, the women are complementary. And just even to the idea, like you're almost trained in a sense for like intimacy in a way, where we have like literal like tenets, we call it, sounds like it's not very spicy at all. It's just an acronym. But it just stands for spiritual, physical, intellectual, creative, and emotional. And it's recognizing that, like, when we're talking about charting cycles and couples trying to achieve or avoid pregnancy, we're talking about intimacy and intercourse that will happen at some point in your cycle. But that as a human being, we need to be fulfilled in all those pillars as well. Right. So like spiritually, we literally have, like, as part of the program, like a questionnaire will be like, all right, like, I'll ask couples like, so what are you doing like to connect in these ways? Like, what are you actually doing to like spiritually connect? Whether it's like not even Catholic, it's just like, do you like Muslim, whoever, connecting spiritually, physically, and that doesn't even mean like sexually. It just means like, do you guys go on walks together? Do you like do physical activity together? Do you cook together? Intellectually, do you talk about the news? Do you talk about like your ideas together? Creatively, you create together with something like a project you're working on. And then emotionally, like recognizing how they're feeling about things. So that is literally a part of the system itself, which I always
like makes you a marriage counselor almost, in a sense.
Yeah, and so it's just like a really, like, they call it like FertilityCare Practitioner, but it's just like this very wide umbrella.
It's like a holistic thing.
Yeah,
and it's like
the whole person.
Yeah, and it's fertility too, in like the broad, almost philosophical sense of like being fruitful, right? So begetting biological children is only one way a married couple bears fruit in their lives. And so it's seeing the whole part of it and understanding that this is an important part of the system that can have medical involvement, but there's a bigger picture here.
Yeah, but I think also more importantly with that, and I'm not trying to like knock and say like things don't work, but just that also, like, there are couples who have infertility and they may not be able to have children no matter what the interventions are. And that does not mean that they're not fruitful. But when we're addressing them as the whole person and saying, like, how are you connecting in all these areas? There is a fruit that can be born from that, because that's like God intended it that way, right? Like a man and woman are joined. And that, like, regardless, like, there will be fruits that come from that marriage, whether it's like the way you care for the elderly around you, the way you help like families around you, that like there's like, that's something like for me, I always say, I'm like, I have 5 kids. I homeschool them. I work. There's the docket is full right now. But I, see things that other people have created. And I'm like thinking like, that's so amazing that they're an artist. They're traveling the world. They're doing this and that. And I'm like, I know right now. Like, I'm full, but like everyone is going to carry out that fruitfulness in a different way. I don't know if everybody is necessarily thinking that way, but just that like there's achievements that are and fruit that comes.
And that word adoption is kind of a lost word today. That is an option for those who are struggling and will just, their bodies will just never allow a body to grow inside of the woman. I get it. But adoption is a viable option. I know someone from our previous parish who adopted a young girl from China, and she's this most precious little thing ever. You know, she's a teenager now. She's getting up there, but they chose to adopt and never look back.
Well, we were talking about before about like a lot of the control that goes into these IVF models, and so a disposition that we have as Catholics is more of a surrender model, and that doesn't mean throw up my hands, giving up, say forget about it, but it's like recognizing that children also are not commodities; they're gifts from God. So whether
like the illusion of control,
right? So maybe it's not going to be possible in this particular context, and that's something that you can look into and grieve over and can grow closer as a couple for, or something else. So it's like when God gives a no, it's never about the door being slammed in your face. It says, okay, instead of staring at this closed door, what other doors are available to me? And of course, walking through that process of grief, that's easier said than done, because like I said before, there's a lot of grief and shame and other issues that are bound up to this. Is very personal stuff for persons. And, we have this beautiful gift of the ability to co-create with the help of God. So what happens when our plans are not God's plans? And I think this is also something that echoes in a lot of pain of women who miscarry even. That's another thing that's never really talked about. I've had multiple friends who have had miscarriages, and they don't know where to go with that. And it just, I'm sure you've heard those stories many times. And it's just like, these are things that warrant handling with reverence, but not sweeping under a rug, not saying like they're there, not, rushing to another thing. Like, let's sit in that for a moment, and then let's pray through that. And where is God asking you to put this now?
Yeah, be compassionate towards it, because often it's just kind of like, okay, well, and usually the typical medical model is like they're not really going to investigate, traditionally until a woman's had 2 miscarriages. And it's like, why do they even have to, why are you going to something one is okay? And just from my own personal experience, and I had kind of like a secondary infertility where I given birth multiple times and then had 2 miscarriages myself, and just from the women I speak to and my own experience, you talked about that couple pursuing IVF, and I'm sure they probably had their own journey that brought them to that decision, where there's a lot of layers and layers of that first, you feel betrayed by your body. You feel and especially even me, coming from I knew what was going on, and but that betrayal of this you should have done this. This is what was supposed to happen, and it didn't happen, and why? So there's that betrayal by the body, and then coming to that point, when you coming out of that, where you find hope, and someone might say it's IVF for you, and so for them that's that spark of hope. Maybe that's what's going to help to pull me out of this, and I have hope again. And then when you come back and say well, it's not okay, but even just to tell them that there may not necessarily be on the right path to that, hope is once again dashed for them. So that just that perspective. I think that personally though, from those times for me, the most fruitful times followed. Just that things were there was clarity. There was just for me, very clear signs from God. This is just the path you're supposed to be on right now. Gained a lot of support from people that I was really blessed to have a really, really supportive community with me. That I literally, I'm one of those people I've been cradle Catholic my whole life, and you obviously go through your ebbs and flows, but that for me was an ebb and flow, or it was a drop. And at the lowest point, that was the first time I actually physically, I felt the prayers of others. I felt the strength and prayers of others, carrying me through that time. And so not to preach to get off the soapbox, but just that it was the hardest thing ended up actually so many amazing things were born from it that I still to this day feel God is guiding them. And I think that one thing I'm going to steal a quote was I just think this is the Dominican sisters, who are the ones who are really big on Instagram right now. It's the Dominicans or
the ones that went viral, the ones in the white habits. So those ladies sisters' life are great, but these you're talking about the clip with the Dominican.
Yeah. So there's these nuns, they've got their own podcast, but they've been going everywhere. They're sister, what's your favorite hobby? That whole thing. And I think it was one of them. I just saw a clip recently that it was like, you know, that God is going to speak through us through our struggle. That is where he's going to reach us most powerfully. And she was referring to the thief on the cross and how he's like at the very end of his life, he's lived this like life of a criminal. And at the very end, he's like, Jesus, remember me. And he makes it to the kingdom, right? And he lived his whole life in like, you know, away from God, but like all that suffering on the cross, he's on the cross, right? And it's at the end where God's like, come into the kingdom.
And I'm just going to be the one to remind you, don't wait for the very end. You might miss.
Yes. It's like, no, you can like, and just,
You know, just live a life of debauchery and you can get away with it at the end.
No, sure.
But God's mercy is such that it could happen, but I always like to be better planned.
But also that like he was suffering, right? And like that life of a thief was actually suffering. Like he was suffering through all of that. And so like, unfortunately, we just think it's going to be this like, kind of like you become Catholic or like, it's going to be great. It's like actually like the most powerful good things in your life can come for those moments and times, you know, that you go.
Yeah, I think the whole, it's like this connected to that objective reality, not just your subjective experience of it too. So we know that God is good, that God is loving, that he wants good for us, that, you know, Jesus came that we might have life and have it to the full. So it becomes this question of, okay, so we can look at the ways that we're not living that and be like, why is my life so, you know, mediocre? Or we can say like, okay, let me open my arms and surrender to the Lord and be like, Lord, I've been trying to do something with this. I've been trying to build my own little kingdom over here and it's not really going so well. Maybe if you could do it better. And then, so just resting in that. So it's not like I have this, control over it, but it's like, I'm giving it to God. So I can take my suffering, my subjective suffering, and I can bind it to Jesus on the cross, that objective hope and the truth of what the cross means and is. And like, that's the way you get through.
Yeah. I think, something I always think about is, my husband does, like religious ed for 8th graders. And I think it's something, it's really hard to speak to them these days. He said it's always been hard to speak to 8th graders, but it's just like, it's, you're fighting a lot of different battles on different fronts nowadays. And something that, like when we talk about, like he'll talk to me, we're just like, oh, like this is what this talk's going to be about. And something I always I bring up to him is just that, you know, a lot of times we have these plans. We have this like master plan for our lives. We're going to like, you know, you're online. It's like, I'm going to like max this. I'm going to be like this entrepreneur. I'm going to do all these things and get all this money. But like come back to like, okay, if like base understanding you believe in God, right? Like, and most of those kids come in like, yeah, I believe in God, like at the very least, right? And if he made everything, then like your plan is never going to be as good as what he's got cooking, right? Like just like baseline, like you are one person and he made all of this. So whatever, like surrendering to that plan is always going to be, no matter what it looks like. And you might think that it's like, it's not going to be exactly what I'm thinking. I remember presenting, you know, to a pre-K one time and woman was like, raise her hand. She's like, well, I have to, you know, get tenure at my job and or like in my position. And I'm like, just, you can plan for those things when you're using a system like this, but also just like that, you know, idea that like God's plan is better. Like it's just inherently going to be better. Like, whatever you think like it's going to be so great, like it could be better.
Life in the Spirit is one of those things that I constantly am pushing and saying, well, yes, I need to have a vision. I also need to know that that vision could be clouded and God might have to clear it up at some point.
One way or another.
One way or the other.
The hard way.
The hard way or God's way.
Usually not. But yeah.
It's plenty of times in my life I've tried the hard way and it didn't work. So.
Right.
So if you've stuck with us this long, I'd like to thank you for being with us. And as always, I'm going to say, if you could hit that like button, that would be wonderful because that helps us a little bit with the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel, whichever platform you're listening on. We are on YouTube every Friday morning at 10 o'clock. A new episode drops. Spotify and Apple Podcasts drop on Fridays as well. Audio only on Apple and Spotify. But if you want to listen to us while you're driving in your car, great. We do love comments, and we thank those of you who have put some comments. Comments are very helpful to us. If there are topics that you would like us to cover or things that you would like us to do, we would be so happy to hear from you. This is a conversation, so we're inviting you basically to be part of the conversation with us. If you have any ways of maybe supporting us, we got another beautiful gift and a note from an anonymous donor. Thank you so much, whoever the anonymous donor was who gave us a very nice gift. I'm very, very thankful for that. But if you could support us, again, these podcasts are free to you, but not free to produce. And so any little bit that can help offset the costs of things, we'd appreciate that. Lastly, I would like to just take this opportunity to thank Jess for being with us today. Your knowledge and your life's experience thus far have been so powerful. And I think we need to hear this more in Catholic circles. I think we need to have these conversations a little bit more so that people know that the Catholic Church isn't just a church of no, we're actually the church of yes. And when you follow that yes the right way, it's just like such a wonderful thing. So again, thank you. Thank you for your presence here in the parish. You and your husband are such a wonderful couple, and I see the kids every week with you. It was quite the surprise to me this weekend when I found out that you worked at the Gianna Center.
Holy Spirit dropped it in there.
The Holy Spirit dropped it in there.
Pulled me out of the woodwork.
There you go.
But
Actually, we were talking about, Randy and I had been talking about it with the first episode, if we could get someone from the Gianna Center, but it was kind of like last minute.
right.
And what does God do? He provides.
Yeah, this is actually like a very crazy week for me. So the fact that this slot was even in here, I'm like, so
Then this was providential.
it was very, very much so. But like, glad to be here. Really happy.
It's such a great part of the parish too. So thank you for all you do. So how about we close with a prayer? Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, Lord Jesus Christ, you are the source of all life, and you gift us with life. And in this life, you have given us wisdom. You've given us the ability to understand. Help us to use that understanding to bring greater glory to your name, to bring greater glory to your name as we strive to grow ever closer to you in all the things we do. Help us to appreciate the gift of fertility and the gift of new life. Help us to always appreciate those who serve life and those who are such a blessing in this world to others and helping them to choose life. Most especially today, Lord, I ask you to send your Holy Spirit upon all who hear these words. Let them know they are loved and that you are with them. And let help them to trust in you, who are Lord forever and ever. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Thanks be to God.